please subscribe and don't forget to press the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload a new video.
Here's a special conversation. PwC's Global Head of Indirect Tax, Joe Bello, joins us now, and Shireen Bhan is with us to take us through that special interaction. Shireen, over to you.
Well, thanks very much. Yes, we are now joined by Joe Bello, the head of indirect tax at PwC. Joe, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV18. Let me start by asking you about the GST experience in India. What are you hearing from your global clients about how the GST rollout has panned out? We're now approaching the first year milestone for the GST implementation here in India. What's been the feedback on the ground?
I think the feedback on the ground, or maybe from around the world, as the world watches India implement this GST, is that it's happened. You've implemented a GST system. Yes, it's had its bumps in the road and on the journey, but you've made it happen, and you've made it happen really quite quickly. There were a lot of companies all around the world who thought it was never going to happen, that it surely must get delayed, but it's working. So people are really impressed that India has managed to achieve such a feat.
Right. Well, the fact that the GST is up and running and approaching its first year anniversary, you're saying that in itself is a significant achievement. But Joe, I want to talk to you about global trends that we see in 2018. PwC does a study with the World Bank. Paying taxes 2018 is how you title your report. What are the key trends that report shows up, and especially about India and this region?
I would say that it's certainly showing that both tax authorities and companies are using technology and using technology to create efficiencies in both the collection of tax and the compliance of tax. But it also shows that you've got new systems coming up all over the world and immense change. As part of that, as you see those new systems coming up, what you see in the trends in paying taxes is that when you get a new implementation, the time to comply for any business with that new implementation obviously goes up. But actually what we've seen in India is that that time to comply is not going up as maybe as much as in other countries. You've had a lot of help from the authorities, all the businesses and communication to understand what is needed and what things mean and where things are going. And so actually the time to comply as you implemented a new system in India didn't go up quite as much as it did in other countries. So technology is the trend we're seeing, how it's being used, tax authorities using it to mine data, ensure compliance, companies using it to make life easier and reduce the cost of compliance and the time it takes businesses to comply. And we are expecting to see that impact even greater and greater in years to come.
So one is, of course, the trend of digital technology changing tax administration, changing compliance. But I want to ask you about how we should now read the GST implementation and its impact as far as revenue and the economy is concerned. We've touched the 1 lakh crore rupee mark here in India, but authorities tell us that perhaps that is not the trend just yet. We need to wait a bit longer to see if that stabilizes. But in your assessment of the experience that you've seen globally with consumption taxes, how long before we see stability in terms of revenue and its impact in terms of GDP performance?
I think for India, you are on a journey where you're implementing still new systems. The conversation I understand that's going on even today about returns, the new implementation of the e-way bill recently, I think you're still on a journey where you haven't yet settled down in terms of your system, and so you cannot really expect to have settled down yet in terms of how much you're going to be collecting in taxes, and you won't settle down yet in terms of your economic impact. But when the system and the compliance and some of the law has really settled down, and the change that you're seeing in the legislation and the compliance requirements has reduced, give it 6 months or a year and you'll start to see the impact. And you'll start to see businesses change and really realise what it's like to do business in India.
I'll end then by asking you, Joe, about the global experience when it comes to GST rates. I mean, we've got perhaps the highest number of slabs here in India when it comes to the goods and services tax, and the hope is that as things stabilize on the ground, we will see some of those slabs being collapsed. What's your own take on that, and what do you believe is the best way forward?
Sorry, I didn't quite hear. What's going to collapse?
No, I was talking about how we have a number of GST rates here in India, and the hope is that we will perhaps move towards a 3-tier structure in future. When that happens, we're not clear. But given the global experience, what would your own assessment be on that issue?
I think that actually the number of rates that you have has to be appropriate for the diversity of your country or your region and your population who's paying the tax. So if you look at a region like the European Union, for example, it might look like it's got 3 rates: a standard rate, a reduced rate, and a 0 rate. But actually it doesn't, because each of the states within the region have different rates within each of those 3 tiers. And that is because of the need for diversity and the right thing within those states, and also because you're leaving the constitutional right to decide taxes in a state up to the state and its judicial and constitutional process. Therefore, you might want to collapse the rates and unify them, but actually they haven't succeeded in doing that since 1994 in Europe. So I would be very impressed if India managed to do that and achieve that in a time frame. Now, I have been astounded by what India has managed to achieve and how quickly it's managed to implement its GST system. You know, it would never have happened that quickly in Europe. So I think, you know, you can take that comparative with a pinch of salt, because I think India can achieve things that Europe